Virgin King waited for his noble bride, but when a black peasant woman arrived at his castle, the bells were tolling, thunder split the skies, and the kingdom held its breath. A young king, still untouched, still untested, stood ready to welcome his noble bride. But when the gates creaked open, it was no princess who stepped inside. It was a weary, black peasant woman, soaked from the storm, clutching nothing but a satchel of herbs. The court gasped. The guards jeered. Yet the king, God help him, did not send her away. Whispers swept the castle. Could this truly be the bride? Or had fate itself walked through the storm? But as envy sharpened its claws and powerful men plotted in the shadows, one truth rose like fire in the king's heart. This woman carried a strength no crown could command. What happens when the weight of a kingdom collides with the power of love? And will a peasant girl's grace be enough to save a throne or bring it crashing down forever? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The storm howled against the castle walls like an angry beast, making even the thick stone chambers shudder. Inside his private chambers, King Alaric paced before the blazing hearth, his shadow dancing across the richly woven tapestries. Though only 20 years old, the weight of the crown and his impending marriage pressed heavily upon his shoulders. Your Majesty must project strength and dignity. Lord Chancellor Blackwood reminded him for what felt like the 100th time. The alliance with Brunswick depends upon this match. Alaric nodded, though his heart wasn't in it. The flames flickered as another gust rattled the window panes, and he clasped his hands behind his back to still their trembling. I understand my duty, Lord Chancellor. Servants scurried about the great hall below, their footsteps echoing up through the stone floors as they prepared for the ceremonial arrival. The scent of beeswax candles and fresh rushes drifted up, mixing with the musty smell of rain that seemed to seep through every crack. Please, Lord, Alaric whispered, too softly for his advisors to hear, grant me the courage to be the husband she deserves, the king my people need. The chamber door creaked open as Master of Ceremony Rothwell entered, his face pinched with concern. Everything is prepared below, Your Majesty. The bride's procession should arrive within the hour, though this weather. He trailed off, glancing anxiously at the rain-lashed windows. Indeed. Alaric moved to the window, pressing his palm against the cold glass. Beyond the courtyard's torchlight, darkness had swallowed the kingdom whole. What sort of omen was this for a royal wedding, Your Majesty? A guard burst through the door, chest heaving. There's been an incident at the gate. Alaric turned, grateful for any distraction from his brooding thoughts. Speak. A woman, sire. She appeared at the gate alone. No carriage, no escort. The guards have her below. The tight knot in Alaric's chest loosened slightly. At least it wasn't news of disaster befalling his bride's procession. Very well. I shall see her. But sire, Lord Chancellor protested, the ceremonial preparations can wait a moment longer. Alaric strode past him, secretly relieved to have something to do besides pace and pray. The great hall blazed with hundreds of candles, their light reflecting off the polished floors and gilded mirrors. Two guards flanked a bedraggled figure who stood dripping onto the expensive carpets. As Alaric descended the broad staircase, he was struck by the woman's bearing. Though she was clearly exhausted, her spine remained straight, her chin lifted with quiet dignity despite her dire state. She was a striking sight. A black woman, in a simple dress now soaked through, her feet bare and muddy, clutching a small leather satchel to her chest. The guards held her arms roughly, as though she might bolt at any moment. Release her, Alaric commanded, surprising himself with the authority in his voice. The guards immediately stepped back, though they kept their hands on their weapons. Your Majesty. The woman sank into a graceful curtsy, despite her exhaustion. I beg sanctuary within your walls. Rise and explain yourself, Alaric said, gentling his tone. There was something about her quiet strength that commanded respect, regardless of her apparent station. I'm called Rose, Your Majesty. I served, in the Duchess of Brunswick's household. She held up the satchel. I was sent ahead with her special herbs and medicines. But the storm, she swallowed hard. The bridges are flooding. I had to find another way across the river. I lost my horse, my shoes. You dare approach the castle alone on foot? One of the guards demanded. On the eve of His Majesty's wedding? I dare to fulfill my duty, she replied evenly, though Alaric noticed her hands trembling slightly around the satchel. These herbs are vital to her grace's health and comfort. I swore to deliver them safely. Something in her voice, the quiet determination, the unwavering sense of duty despite all obstacles, resonated deeply with Alaric. Here was someone who understood the weight of responsibility, regardless of their station. This is preposterous, Lord Chancellor Blackwood declared, having followed Alaric down to the hall. She could be anyone, a spy, an assassin. She should be thrown in the dungeons until her story can be verified. Rose didn't flinch at the threat, but Alaric saw exhaustion threatening to overwhelm her proud bearing. Her simple dress clung to her shivering frame, and despite her dignity, she swayed slightly where she stood. Enough, Alaric said firmly, surprising his advisors into silence. This woman has endured much to fulfill her duty. She will be treated with kindness and respect. He turned to the hovering servants. Prepare a room in the outer guest quarters. Provide dry clothes, food, and a warm fire. To the guards, he added, you will stand watch outside her door, not to imprison, but to protect and serve if she has need of anything. Your Majesty, Blackwood spluttered. Surely you cannot mean to. I mean to show the hospitality and mercy expected of a Christian king. Alaric cut him off. To Rose, he said more gently, rest assured, your dedication to your mistress will be remembered. We will verify your story when the Duchess arrives, but for now, you have my protection. The relief that flooded her face was quickly masked, but it touched something in Alaric's heart. Thank you, Your Majesty. You are as kind as they say. A servant girl led Rose away, and Alaric watched until she disappeared up the stairs. Only then did he notice the puddles of rainwater she'd left on the floor, and how none of his advisors had offered her so much as a cloak for warmth. The preparations, Lord Chancellor reminded him stiffly. Your Majesty's bride will arrive soon. Yes, of course. But as Alaric climbed back to his chambers, his thoughts kept returning to the strange scene below. He'd been raised on tales of noble ladies and courtly love, taught to expect his heart to stir at the sight of a high-born beauty. No one had warned him about the quiet dignity of a servant who would brave a storm to fulfill her duty. Later that night, with still no word of the bride's procession, Alaric sat beside his chamber window. Lightning split the sky in brilliant forks, illuminating the castle grounds in brief, stark flashes. The ceremony would have to be delayed. The roads were surely impassable now. He should have felt disappointed, anxious about the political implications of this delay. Instead, he found his thoughts drifting to the outer guest wing, where a weary traveler slept under his protection. There had been something in her eyes, a strength, a wisdom that belied her station. The way she'd stood her ground before his guards and advisors, armed with nothing but truth and dignity. Thunder rolled across the kingdom, and Alaric pressed his forehead against the cold glass. He'd spent weeks preparing himself to feel joy at his bride's arrival, to embrace his duty with a glad heart. Now he felt only confusion and a strange stirring in his chest whenever he thought of the woman who had appeared like a spirit out of the storm. Lord, grant me wisdom, he whispered to the rain. Dark night, for I fear I shall need it more than ever. The first light of dawn crept through the narrow window, painting golden stripes across Amara's face. She stirred on the straw mattress, momentarily confused by the unfamiliar weight of the woolen blanket and the cool touch of stone walls around her. Opening her eyes, she gazed in wonder at her surroundings. A small but clean chamber in the castle's outer wing, far grander than any place she'd ever slept. Thank you, Lord, for this shelter, she whispered, pressing her palms together. The storm had passed, leaving behind a fresh morning scented with wet earth and hope. Though her muscles ached from yesterday's desperate journey, she felt renewed by a night's rest in safety. A gentle knock interrupted her morning prayers. "Miss?" A young maid entered, carrying a bundle of clothing. "I've brought you something dry to wear." The girl's eyes were wide with curiosity as she laid out a simple but well-made dress of brown wool. "You're too kind," Amara said softly, noticing how the maid bobbed an unusually deep curtsy. Strange, servants rarely showed such deference to one another. In the castle's vast kitchen below, Amara's arrival had sparked a flurry of speculation. Maids and scullery boys huddled in corners, voices hushed with excitement as they shared their theories. "Did you see how the king himself commanded she be treated well?" One kitchen maid whispered, kneading bread dough with vigorous strokes. "And they say she arrived alone, in common dress." "It must be the bride herself," another declared, stirring a pot of porridge. "Testing her future husband's character like in the old tales. Why else would His Majesty show such concern for a mere servant?" The whispers fell silent when Amara entered the kitchen, seeking breakfast. Every eye followed her movements as she accepted a bowl of porridge with quiet thanks. She ate quickly, uncomfortable with the attention, then asked directions to the king's audience chamber. She knew she must explain herself properly before more misunderstandings arose. The morning sun streamed through tall windows as Amara was led into a small but elegant room where King Alaric waited. He stood by a table laden with maps and papers, looking younger in the daylight than he had the night before. When she curtsied, he gestured for her to rise with a gentle smile. "I trust you slept well?" he asked. "Yes, Your Majesty. I am most grateful for your kindness." Amara's voice was steady despite her racing heart. "But I must explain fully about my mistress, the Duchess." "Please do." The king settled into a chair, motioning for her to sit as well, an honor that made her hesitate before carefully perching on the edge of a delicate wooden seat. 3 days ago, as our party approached the river crossing, Her Grace fell ill with fever, Amara explained. She sent me ahead with her special medicines, knowing she would need them when she arrives. I am skilled in herbs and healing, you see, and she trusted me with this task. "A heavy responsibility," the king observed, studying her face. "One I take most seriously, Your Majesty. The Duchess has always shown me great kindness. I would not betray her trust." Something in her earnest tone seemed to touch him, for his expression softened. "You speak of her with true loyalty. That speaks well of you both." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. Several richly dressed courtiers burst in, then stopped short at the sight of Amara seated in the king's presence. Their expressions shifted from shock to calculating interest as they noted how the king remained comfortably seated rather than dismissing her. "Your Majesty," one nobleman said with a sly smile, "we came to discuss the wedding preparations, but we see you are otherwise engaged." "Indeed," said another, eyeing Amara's simple dress with knowing looks. "How clever to arrange such a private meeting with your bride, sire. Testing her humility in disguise, perhaps." "I am not," Amara began, but the king raised his hand slightly, silencing her protest. "My audience with this lady is not yet concluded," he said firmly. "We will discuss preparations later." The courtiers withdrew, but Amara saw the speculative gleams in their eyes. More rumors would surely follow. "Your Majesty," she said urgently, "I cannot allow them to think." "For now, let them think what they will," he replied, though he looked troubled. "It may be safer until your mistress arrives." The rest of the morning found Amara in the castle's infirmary, seeking to make herself useful rather than hide in her chamber. The head physician, an elderly man with kind eyes, was happy to accept help from someone knowledgeable in herbal remedies. She was grinding feverfew leaves when they brought in the servant boy, his small body burning with fever. The physician had been called away to attend a noble lady's headache, leaving Amara to tend the child. She worked steadily, brewing the herbs she needed and bathing his hot forehead with cool cloths. By midday, his fever had broken. "You saved my son," the boy's mother wept, clutching Amara's hands. "God bless you, miss." Word of her skill spread quickly through the servants' quarters. Soon other staff members were coming to her with minor ailments. A cook's burned hand, a stable boy's sprained ankle. Each one she treated with gentle care, earning their gratitude and respect. As evening approached, trumpets announced the arrival of foreign carriages in the courtyard. Amara was heading back to her chamber when she encountered a group of richly dressed men in the corridor, the advance party of envoys from the bride's homeland. Before she could step aside, they spotted her. "Your Grace!" the leader exclaimed in heavily accented speech, sweeping into a deep bow. The others followed suit, leaving Amara frozen in horror. "I am not," she began, but fell silent as King Alaric appeared behind the envoys. Their eyes met across the bowed heads, and she saw him make a slight gesture, asking her to wait, to say nothing. "Gentlemen," the king said smoothly, "you are early. We did not expect you until tomorrow." "We made good time once the storm passed," said the lead envoy, straightening. He smiled at Amara with approval. "And I see we have discovered your charming bride already sampling life among the common folk. How delightfully unconventional." Alaric's face revealed nothing as he guided the envoys away, leaving Amara trembling in the corridor. She hurried to her chamber, lit a candle with shaking hands, and fell to her knees beside the bed. "Oh Lord," she whispered into the growing darkness, "why have you placed me in this impossible position? I am a simple woman, not meant for such deceptions. Give me wisdom, I pray. Show me how to protect both truth and peace, without bringing shame to my mistress or harm to this kingdom." The candle flickered, casting her shadow large against the stone wall. Outside her window, stars began to appear in the twilight sky, offering no answers to her desperate prayers. Amara remained kneeling, her heart heavy with the weight of a pretense she had never sought and could not safely deny. Morning sunlight streamed through the great hall's towering windows, casting golden patterns across the polished oak tables. The scent of fresh bread and honey filled the air as nobles gathered for breakfast, their silks rustling as they took their places. King Alaric sat at the high table, his crown glinting in the early light. When Amara appeared in the doorway, wearing the simple brown dress from yesterday, the effect was immediate. Every lord in the hall rose to his feet, bowing deeply as though she were indeed royal. Her cheeks warmed at the attention as she made her way forward, trying to remember how she had seen noble ladies walk at her old household. "Good morrow, my lady," several voices murmured as she passed. She noticed how they studied her every movement, perhaps searching for signs of her supposed noble upbringing beneath the common dress. The king gestured to the empty chair at his right hand, the queen's traditional place. Amara's heart pounded as she took the seat, feeling the weight of dozens of watching eyes. "You must try the fresh honey," King Alaric said kindly, loud enough for others to hear. "Our apiaries produced an excellent harvest this year." After breakfast, the king drew her aside into a small antechamber, his young face troubled. "This deception has gone too far," he began. "I must tell them the truth." "Your Majesty." The chamberlain appeared in the doorway, his face tight with concern. He bowed quickly to Amara, before turning to the king. "A word in private, if I may?" In the king's study, the chamberlain paced anxiously. "Sire, you cannot expose this situation now. The envoys have already sent word to their court about meeting the bride. To reveal the truth would make them lose face completely." "But surely honesty would risk war, Your Majesty. They would see it as a deliberate humiliation of their princess, their entire kingdom, and our own nobles." The chamberlain lowered his voice. "Many have already pledged support based on this match. To admit, we allowed them to bow to a common servant." Alaric sank into his chair, looking every bit his 20 years. "So, we are all trapped by this mistake." Meanwhile, Amara faced trials of her own. The ladies-in-waiting descended upon her chamber, armed with instructions to prepare her for court life. They believed they were polishing a noble lady's rustic manners, not teaching a servant from scratch. No, sighed Lady Margaret for the 10th time. "The curtsy must be deeper, more graceful." Again. Amara's legs trembled as she attempted the movement once more. The ladies exchanged glances at her awkwardness. "And your speech?" Lady Anne added with barely concealed disdain. "Surely your unique accent could be softened? Try repeating after me. One must maintain proper dignity at all times." Amara repeated the phrase, hearing the difference between her simple tones and their cultured pronunciation. She saw them wince, though they quickly masked their reactions. "Perhaps we should focus on deportment," Lady Margaret suggested. "Proper posture while walking, sitting, eating." Hour after hour they drilled her, their patience wearing thin but never quite breaking. They dared not openly criticize one they believed their future queen, but their subtle sighs and shared looks spoke volumes. As evening approached, Amara's head spun with rules and corrections. Hold the fork just so. Never speak until spoken to. Eyes downcast in modesty, but not too low. Back straight, but not stiff. Every movement measured, every word careful. A page arrived with a message. The king requested her presence in the courtyard. The ladies fluttered around her, adjusting her dress and hair, before finally allowing her to leave. The courtyard was peaceful in the gathering dusk. Lanterns cast warm light across the cobblestones, and the evening air carried the sweet scent of night-blooming jasmine. 2 guards stood at a respectful distance as King Alaric approached. "I wanted to thank you," he said quietly, offering his arm as they began to walk. "You've shown remarkable composure in an impossible situation." "Your Majesty is too kind." Amara's voice was soft. "I pray daily for guidance." "As do I." He glanced at her profile in the moonlight. "You must find our court very strange after your life of service." "Everything here is different," she admitted. "The ladies try to teach me, but I fear I disappoint them." "You could never disappoint." His words came quickly, surprising them both. After a moment, he added more formally, "You bear yourself with natural dignity, whatever your birth." They walked in comfortable silence for a while, their steps falling into an easy rhythm. The moon sailed between scattered clouds, painting silver patterns on the castle walls. "I never thought to find myself here," Amara mused. "When I was sent ahead with the medicines, I imagined only delivering them and returning to my duties. And I never imagined." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Life rarely follows the paths we expect." Their circuit of the courtyard complete, they paused near the chapel entrance. The guards remained at their posts, shadows in the darkness. "Thank you for this moment of peace," the king said softly. "In your presence, I feel I can speak freely, without the weight of crown and ceremony." "You honor me with your trust," Amara replied, curtsying as she had been taught. This time, the movement felt almost natural. After she retired to her chamber, King Alaric entered the chapel alone. The only light came from the eternal flame on the altar, casting dancing shadows on the ancient stones. He knelt before the cross, his whispered words barely disturbing the sacred silence. "Lord, I am lost between duty and conscience. My mind knows what honor and kingship demand, yet my heart." He bowed his head. "Her grace shames those born to privilege. Her gentle spirit, her quiet strength. How can I betray such trust? Guide me, Father. Show me the path of both truth and mercy." The chapel remained silent, holding his prayers in its age-old stones. Through the high windows, moonlight touched the altar like a benediction, offering no answers to the Aunor, young king's troubled heart. Dawn painted the castle walls in soft pink light as Amara made her way down the worn stone steps to the servants' hall. The familiar scents of yeast and wood smoke welcomed her, reminding her of simpler days. In the busy kitchen, a young maid's cry of pain drew her attention. Martha burned her hand on the kettle, Cook explained, frowning with concern as she examined the reddened skin. The kitchen maid bit her lip, trying not to weep. "If I may," Amara said softly, reaching for her herb pouch. "I know something that might help." Cook nodded, and Amara quickly ground fresh comfrey leaves with a mortar and pestle. The sharp green scent rose as she worked. "This will ease the pain and help it heal," she explained, gently spreading the paste over Martha's burn. Keep it covered with a clean cloth, and change the dressing tonight." "It feels better already, miss," Martha whispered, amazed at how the cooling herbs soothed the angry flesh. Other servants gathered to watch, their initial wariness melting into curiosity. "Where did you learn such healing?" asked Tom, the boot boy, who had been nursing a persistent cough. "My grandmother taught me," Amara replied, already sorting through her herbs for something to ease his breathing. Every village has its healers, passing down their knowledge through generations. As she tended to Tom's cough with thyme and honey, more servants approached with their own small hurts and ailments. Cook watched with growing approval as Amara helped each one, offering remedies mixed with gentle words of comfort. Unknown to them all, King Alaric observed from the kitchen doorway, moved by the scene before him. Here was no false ceremony or courtly pretense, only genuine kindness freely given. He watched Amara's gentle hands at work, noting how naturally leadership sat upon her shoulders when she served others. Later that morning, they met in the castle gardens. Spring sunshine warmed the herb beds, where Amara knelt, explaining the properties of each plant to the attentive king. "This is feverfew," she said, touching the delicate white flowers. "It eases headaches and summer fevers. And here," she pointed to a low-growing plant with tiny purple blooms, "wild thyme for courage and clear breathing." "I've studied statecraft all my life," Alaric admitted, "but never these practical arts that truly help people." He reached down to help her stand, their fingers brushing briefly. "What else can you teach me?" They walked among the beds as Amara shared the common folks' wisdom, which herbs to dry for winter, how to make healing teas and poultices. The king listened intently, asking questions that revealed his genuine interest in his people's ways. "Your knowledge is worth more than gold," he said earnestly. "How many lives could be saved if such learning were more widely shared?" "Every village mother knows these things," Amara demurred. "We simply help where we can." "No," Alaric shook his head. "You do far more than that. You bring hope and comfort to those who suffer." His eyes held hers for a long moment. "As you have brought to this castle since your arrival." The afternoon found them both seeking solitude in the chapel. Amara had slipped in to pray, not realizing the king had done the same. As she knelt in the quiet space, a familiar hymn rose to her lips. One her mother had sung while working. Amazing grace. How sweet the sound. Her clear voice filled the sacred space with its simple beauty. To her surprise, another voice joined hers, the king's rich baritone blending perfectly with her melody. Together they sang the ancient words of praise, their voices twining in the sunlit air like incense rising to heaven. When the last note faded, neither spoke for a long moment. The holy silence held them still, hearts beating in time with a deeper truth than either dared name. Finally, Alaric whispered, "I've never heard that hymn sung so beautifully." "It comforts me," Amara replied softly. "Reminds me that God's grace reaches everyone, high or low." Their shared moment of worship did not go unnoticed. Lady Margaret, passing the chapel door, observed their rapt expressions with growing alarm. At dinner that evening, whispers circulated among the nobles. "Did you see how he watches her?" one courtier murmured behind his goblet. "She's bewitched him somehow," Lady Anne insisted, using common charms and herbs, no doubt. "The king seems quite transformed in her presence," agreed another, with meaningful looks. Indeed, as sunset painted the castle windows in amber and gold, Alaric escorted Amara back to her quarters. Their steps were slow, reluctant to end another day in each other's company. "Thank you," he said, pausing before her door, "for sharing your wisdom, for showing me a different way to serve our people." "Your Majesty is too kind," Amara responded, her eyes downcast. Alaric's hand moved slightly toward hers, then pulled back as though burned. When she looked up, his eyes held such depth of feeling that her breath caught. But the moment passed, propriety reasserting itself like a wall between them. "Rest well," he said formally, though his voice carried a gentler note. With a slight bow, he turned and walked away, his shoulders straight but his steps heavy with unspoken words. Amara watched until he disappeared around the corner, her hand resting on the door handle where his had almost touched it. The setting sun cast long shadows in the corridor, but none longer than those falling across their hearts. A chill wind swept through the castle courtyard as hoofbeats thundered against the cobblestones. The guards rushed forward as a horse and rider, both covered in mud, staggered through the gates. The exhausted animal collapsed, its flanks heaving, while the messenger stumbled to his feet. "The king," he gasped. "I must see the king at once." Within moments, the great hall filled with rustling silks and urgent whispers as nobles gathered. King Alaric sat upon his throne, his face grave as the mud-stained messenger knelt before him. "Speak," Alaric commanded. "Your Majesty." The messenger's voice cracked with fatigue. "I bring grievous news. The Lady Celestine, your intended bride, has." He paused, swallowing hard. "She has passed from this world. A sudden fever took her 3 nights ago." Gasps echoed through the hall. Lord Roderick's eyes narrowed as he studied the king's shocked expression. "How convenient," a noblewoman whispered too loudly, "that the true bride dies while a peasant warms her place." "Silence," Alaric thundered, rising from his throne. "I will not have such vile accusations in my court." But the damage was done. Envoy Heinrich's face had turned purple with rage. "This is an outrage," he declared. "First, we find a common servant playing at being noble, and now our princess dies mysteriously." He turned to his retinue. "We depart at once. Let it be known that all alliances are hereby suspended." The foreign delegation stormed from the hall, their boots echoing on stone. As darkness fell, the king's council gathered in urgent session. "The situation is untenable, Your Majesty," Lord Roderick insisted. "The woman must go. Her presence breeds suspicion and threatens the realm's stability." "She is innocent of any wrongdoing," Alaric protested, but his words fell on deaf ears. Later that night, Amara stood in the shadows of a castle corridor, her heart pounding as she overheard voices from the council chamber. "At dawn, then," Lord Roderick was saying, "the guards will escort her to the border. She'll be given provisions and warned never to return." Amara pressed a hand to her mouth, stifling a sob. Her fingers found the familiar leather of her herb satchel, her only possession. The king had shown her such kindness, and now his reign was threatened because of her. She could not allow that to happen. The tallow candle guttered in Amara's chamber, casting wavering shadows on the rough parchment before her. Tears splashed onto the page as she carefully formed each letter, her normally steady hand trembling. "Dearest Majesty," she wrote, "I cannot bear to be the cause of your realm's suffering. You showed me kindness when others would have cast me out, but now I must go, for your sake and the kingdom's peace. Please do not seek me. Your crown must come before your heart, as my duty to protect you comes before mine." A soft knock startled her. Martha, the kind-faced kitchen maid who had befriended her first days in the castle, slipped inside. "The guards change at midnight," Martha whispered. "If we go now, I can help you reach the outer gate unseen." Gathering her herb satchel and wrapping herself in a dark cloak, Amara followed Martha through shadowed corridors. They crept past sleeping guards and through the servants' passages until they reached the small postern gate. "God be with you," Martha breathed, embracing her quickly before disappearing back into the darkness. Dawn found King Alaric striding into Amara's empty chamber, his heart already heavy with foreboding. The carefully folded note on her pillow confirmed his fears. Reading her words, his hands clenched, crumpling the parchment. "Bring my horse," he commanded, startling the nearby servants. Despite their protests about the dangerous conditions, he mounted and rode out into the misty morning. The rain-slick roads made tracking impossible. For hours he searched, pushing his mount through every nearby village, questioning travelers and merchants. But Amara had vanished like morning mist. Upon his mud-splattered return, the council wasted no time. "Your Majesty," Lord Roderick pressed, "the Princess of Nordland would make an excellent match. Her dowry alone would restore our troubled alliances. The king barely heard them. As darkness fell, he slipped away to the chapel, laying his golden crown before the altar. Kneeling on the cold stone, he pressed his forehead to his clasped hands. "Lord," he whispered, his voice raw with anguish, "I have failed both love and honor. I let her go to save my crown, yet feel I have lost my soul instead. Grant me strength to bear this burden." The chapel's silence offered no answer to his desperate prayer. The great hall echoed with heated voices as another council dragged into its third hour. 14 days had passed since Amara's departure, and the kingdom's troubles had only deepened. Lord Roderick's face was flushed with frustration as he gestured at the pile of diplomatic messages. "The eastern borders report military movements, Your Majesty. Our former allies grow bold in their displeasure. We must act swiftly." The king sat motionless on his throne, his face carved from stone. Before him, an array of miniature portraits lay scattered across the council table. Princesses from every neighboring realm, each one a potential diplomatic solution. "Here," Lady Margaret insisted, thrusting forward another painting. "The Princess of Nordland, golden hair, accomplished in music." "Enough." King Alaric's quiet word cut through the clamor. "I will not choose a bride like selecting a horse at market." The council chamber erupted in protests, but fell silent as Sir Thomas, the king's most trusted knight, entered with mud-stained boots. "Your Majesty," he bowed, "I bring news from the borderlands." The king leaned forward, his composure cracking. "Speak." "There are tales in every village of a healer, a woman with dark skin who tends the plague, stricken without fear. They say she works miracles with herbs, yet grows weaker herself from exhaustion." "Where?" The word escaped Alaric's lips like a prayer. "The village of Millbrook, near the eastern border. I saw her myself, sire. She refuses to rest while others suffer." The king rose suddenly, causing his advisors to step back. He gripped Sir Thomas's weather-worn hand, his eyes blazing with determination. "Then I shall go to her. Myself, crown or no crown." The council's shocked gasps filled the hall, but Alaric stood unwavering. In his heart, he knew at last that some things were worth more than a golden circle of metal. Dawn painted the eastern sky in gentle strokes of pink and gold, as King Alaric guided his horse into the village of Millbrook. His plain brown cloak concealed his royal garments, but nothing could hide the shock in his eyes as he took in the sight before him. Thin-faced children huddled in doorways, and worried mothers clutched crying babies to their breasts. The plague's shadow lay heavy over the humble cottages. Following the whispered directions of grateful villagers, he found her in a small hut at the edge of town. Amara knelt beside a straw pallet, her gentle hands pressing a cool cloth to a child's forehead. Her own face was drawn with exhaustion, her shoulders drooping beneath her simple dress. "Amara," he breathed. She turned, her eyes widening. "Your Majesty, you cannot be here." Her voice quavered with concern. "The sickness your kingdom needs you whole and well." "My kingdom needs its heart restored," he said softly, stepping closer. "And you, my lady, have carried it with you." "Please," she whispered, rising unsteadily to her feet. "Leave me here. I am doing good work among these people. Do not risk your crown for my sake." Before he could respond, villagers began gathering at the doorway. They pressed forward, speaking over each other in earnest voices. "She saved my son's life. Our angel of mercy she is. A true queen of the poor, that's what she be." The humble folk knelt in the dirt before her, their faces shining with love and gratitude. Alaric watched as Amara tried to protest, to raise them up, and his heart swelled with certainty. He stepped forward and took her hand, declaring clearly for all to hear, "I will bring her back to the castle, where she belongs, in honor." The villagers erupted in cheers as he helped her onto his horse. Amara trembled as she leaned against his chest, her voice barely audible. "I am terrified for you," she whispered. "And I am moved by your courage," he answered, gathering the reins. The great iron gates of the castle groaned open as King Alaric rode through, Amara sitting before him on his horse. In the courtyard, nobles drew back with shocked gasps, their faces twisting with disdain. But the castle servants rushed forward, their joyful cries echoing off the stone walls. Kitchen maids, stable boys, and washerwomen pressed close, reaching out to touch Amara's skirts in welcome. "Stand back," shouted Lord Chancellor Burke, his face red with fury. "This woman's presence is treason against the crown." "Then I stand accused," King Alaric declared, helping Amara dismount. "Summon everyone to the Great Hall, now." Within the hour, the vast chamber filled with people from every rank, richly dressed nobles, clergy in their robes, and common folk in plain garments. They watched as village after village stepped forward to testify. "My son burned with fever," a weathered farmer said, his voice carrying clear and strong. "The finest physicians had given up hope, but she stayed by his bedside 3 days and nights, using her herbs and prayers. He lives today because of her." More villagers spoke of her courage, of how she tended the sick when others fled in fear. Then the castle servants came forward, led by the old cook. "I've served 3 kings," the cook announced proudly. "Never have I seen such dignity and kindness as in this woman. She treats all people as God's children, high or low." The crowd's voice grew like thunder. "She is our true queen," they shouted, "not by birth, but by deeds." Silence fell as King Alaric stepped forward, taking Amara's trembling hand in his. His voice rang with quiet authority as he faced his kingdom. "I will not put aside the woman whom God himself has shown to be noble of soul." The cathedral bells rang out across the kingdom, their deep, bronze voices echoing through narrow streets and rolling countryside. 3 Sundays had passed since the king's declaration, and now the massive church stood filled to bursting. Nobles in their silk finery sat shoulder to shoulder with villagers in their Sunday best, while clergy in white robes lined the ancient stone walls. Hundreds of beeswax candles cast a golden glow throughout the sacred space, their light dancing off the stained glass windows. The air held the sweet mingling of incense and fresh flowers brought by both castle gardens and humble village plots. Amara stood at the cathedral entrance, her heart beating quickly beneath her wedding gown. The dress itself told a story of unity. Castle seamstresses had worked alongside village women, combining fine silk with simple linen, royal purple with pure white. Delicate embroidery depicted healing herbs among noble crests, marking her journey from humble healer to beloved queen. "'Tis time," whispered the elderly priest, offering his arm. The congregation rose as one as Amara walked down the long aisle. Though some nobles turned their faces away, their disapproval was drowned in the sea of joyful smiles from the common folk who lined the path. At the altar stood King Alaric, his eyes shining with love and certainty. "Dearly beloved," the archbishop began, his voice filling the vast space, "we are gathered here in God's sight to join these 2 souls." The ancient vows were spoken with clear, steady voices. When Alaric slipped the golden ring onto Amara's finger, many in the crowd wept openly. But the ceremony was not yet complete. After the marriage blessing, Alaric turned to face the assembly, lifting a delicate golden crown from its velvet cushion. "Before God and these witnesses," he proclaimed, "I crown thee queen, not by accident of birth, but by the nobility of thy virtuous heart." He placed the crown upon her dark curls as she knelt before him. The archbishop raised his hands in blessing, and even the grumbling nobles fell silent before God's authority in his own house. When Alaric helped Amara to her feet and kissed her tenderly, the cathedral erupted in cheers. Their kiss sealed more than their love. It marked the beginning of a new era, where worth would be measured by deeds rather than birth alone. As darkness fell that evening, the newly wedded couple knelt together before the hearth in the royal chamber. The fire cast warm shadows across their faces as they clasped hands in prayer, thanking God for bringing them together against all odds. Alaric turned to his bride, his voice soft with wonder. "I was a virgin king until God sent me you. Now I am a husband, and our kingdom shall know love." The flames danced merrily in the hearth, their golden light embracing the pair as they began their new life together, a symbol of the warmth and hope their union brought to the kingdom. Thank you for watching. Stories like this remind us who we are. If something touched your heart, go ahead and subscribe. I'll be back tomorrow with another story that just might stay with you.